Καλησπέρα και χρόνια πολλά. Καλώς ήρθατε στο Κέντρο Πολιτισμού, Ίδρυμα Σταύρος Νιάρχος. Με λένε Νικόλα Γιατρομανολάκη και είμαι ο επικεφαλής του τμήματος Μάρκετινγκ και Επικοινωνίας του Κέντρου Πολιτισμού. Και εκ μέρους του Κέντρου σας καλωσορίζουμε σε μία από τις πρώτες εκδηλώσεις του 2018 από μία μεγάλη σειρά δράσεων και εκδηλώσεων που θα δείτε να ξετυλίγονται και φέτος, χάρη στην δωρεά του Ιδρύματος Σταύρος Νιάρχος. Και είμαστε πάρα πολύ ενθουσιασμένοι που μία από τις πρώτες μας εκδηλώσεις είναι αυτή η συζήτηση σήμερα με τους Gilbert George. Δεν πρόκειται να μακρηγορήσω, απλώς θα σας πω μία-δύο κουβέντες για τον συντονιστή της σημερινής μας συζήτησης, τον Michael Bracewell. Ο Michael Bracewell είναι ένας Βρετανός συγγραφέας με πάρα πολύ σημαντικό και πλούσιο έργο και λογοτεχνικό, αλλά και μη λογοτεχνικό. Επίσης είναι ένας σχολιαστής των πολιτιστικών δρόμενων και έχει γράψει πάρα πολλά βιβλία σε σχέση με την τέχνη και ίσως αν κάποιος αναρωτηθεί γιατί ο συγκεκριμένος θα συντονίσει τη σημερινή συζήτηση, ο Michael πρωτοείδε δουλειά των Gilbert George το 1977, ενώ τα τελευταία 20 χρόνια διατηρεί μαζί τους μια φιλική σχέση που του έχει δώσει τη δυνατότητα πραγματικά να δει από κοντά όχι μόνο τη δουλειά, αλλά τον τρόπο σκέψης και τη μεθοδολογία τους και όλη τους την, ας το πούμε, θεωρία. Αλλά δεν είναι μόνο αυτό. Το Νοέμβριο εκδόθηκε το βιβλίο What is Gilbert George από τον Michael Bracewell, που ουσιαστικά συνοψίζει αυτή την 20χρονη φιλία τους και με σπουδή που έχει κάνει πάνω στη δουλειά τους. Οπότε, ελπίζω να απολαύσετε τη σημερινή εκδήλωση. Να ξέρετε ότι θα υπάρχει δυνατότητα να κάνετε και ερωτήσεις στους Gilbert George μετά τη συζήτηση που θα έχουν με τον Michael Bracewell. Επίσης, να σας πούμε, για όσους δεν το έχετε δει ήδη, ότι θα υπάρχει ταυτόχρονη διερμηνία. Μπορείτε να πάρετε ακουστικά από το πλάι, για όσους χρειάζονται ακουστικά. Αυτά. Michael, the floor is yours.
Hello, good evening. Thank you all so much for coming tonight to this conversation with Gilbert and George. You know, the history of art is filled with many important dates, but for me, one of the most important, certainly in the history of recent art, is the 26th of September, 1967. Because it was on that day at St. Martin's School of Art in London, on the Charing Cross Road, that a young art student from Devon in the west of England called George met a young art student from the Dolomites in northern Italy called Gilbert. Whenever I think about the moment when Gilbert and George met, I always remember a sentence in one of the novels by Gustave Flaubert called Bouvard and Pécuchet. Because when Bouvard first meets Pécuchet, Flaubert writes, the relation between these two men was profound, immediate, and absolute. So 50 years ago, Gilbert met George, and since then, they have dedicated themselves tirelessly to their art. They have had groundbreaking, pioneering exhibitions all over the world, including in Russia and in China. They also have a special relationship with Athens through the gallery of Jean Bernier and Marina Alades, whom they first met in 1980. And it was at Jean and Marina's gallery that Gilbert and George held one of their most beautiful exhibitions, certainly one of the most emotional exhibitions, which was called The Nine Dark Pictures. And that is something I'm going to be talking with them about tonight. So anyway, I just wanted to say that I've known Gilbert and George since 1997. And people sometimes ask, is it all an act? You know, when there aren't people around, do Gilbert and George just live like normal people? You know, they take off the suits, they start wearing tracksuits, they And what I have to tell you is that no, Gilbert and George are Gilbert and George 24/7. They've dedicated themselves to their vision of art for 50 years. And please welcome them now to come and talk to us. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So, one of the things I always wanted to know was that when the two of you met in this way that I described, what was the art school like in those days? When you first became artists, what was being an artist about?
I mean, it was an extraordinary time for us because we were both poor boys from the country. We didn't have any money or any advantages. And there we were in the middle of London, in the Charing Cross Road, in an era of swinging London. It was also the age of the permissive society. Anything goes was a phrase. And we felt very, very privileged. We were in the top floor of at that time, the world's leading art college. It was extraordinary.
And for me, it was quite interesting because at that time, I started out in the Dolomites. Then I went to Austria for 1 year. Then I went to Munich for 6 years, studying art at Munich Academy of Art. But I always had this dream that nothing would happen there. So I had to go to the moon, and the moon was London those days. You know? And without anything, knowing no English or whatsoever, I managed to camp in front of St. Martin's School of Art door until they let me in. It was extraordinary. And they did. It was Philip King who said yes. And then we took the lift up to the top floor. There, this was this extraordinary room full of international artists, and it was total freedom there to be able to do whatever you want.
So what were most of the other students doing? And why? And did you know straight away that you wanted to do something different?
Yes, it was very important to realize that it was just that floor of the building that was special. The rest of the college, which we never visited, we found out about it long after we left St. Martin's, was very conventional. But our department was special in that they rejected the idea of the form of sculpture. They rejected bronze and oil on canvas. It had to be anything other than those traditional forms.
A lot of those our friends became very successful artists, like Richard Long and Bruce McLean was there, and Barry Flanier was there, and well, anyways.
A whole bunch of people, yes.
The other thing that people always think is that, really, I mean, you met in 1967. By 1971, you were internationally famous. Now, what do you think it is that you did that caught the attention of the world?
I think we had two masterly strokes of luck, if there is such a thing as luck. One was launching our career in America by meeting by chance Ilyana Sonnabend, at that time the world's most famous New York art dealer, and then launching our career into Europe by meeting by chance the most important art dealer in Europe at that moment, who was the late Conrad Fischer. So within a very short period, we just launched ourselves in both directions in very grand, important, fast ways.
But the most important part of it was when we had to leave St. Martin's School of Art. Being a student is fine. You want to go, you have your grant, you have your food, you have your friends. But in the moment they chuck you out into the world, no? We had, what are we doing? We don't have a studio. We don't behave like all the other ones. We didn't fit in, no? So how could we be artists? Because that's what we wanted to be. And so the idea is, if you don't have anything, you make yourself the artwork. And that's what we did in 68, 69. And that was our biggest, what we call, vision. And that's the only big idea that we had, to make ourselves the artist, to make the living sculpture, to make a sculpture that is not marble, that is not bronze, but that is living and that can speak and have emotions. And that's our greatest achievement.
It was in a way very lucky that we were two people, because that meant that we couldn't be like all of the other students at St. Martin's who could get a part-time teaching job or a Gulbenkian grant or a grant for 1 year in the London school in Rome. None of the normal things were available to a twosome. No one would ever thought of us as an artist as two. So we were out there, totally alone, very poor, and had to find some new way to be artists. Unlike most of the students at St. Martin's, we didn't come from middle-class backgrounds, so we didn't have the safety net that the middle classes have. And that was also very good for us.
And it was very good for us that we bought what we call a record in what we call near Euston Square, and we took it back to East End of London, where we had a small room, and we started to feel what are we? We are underneath the arches, no? That we created the living sculpture, us alone in the world, happy but alone. And we made a kind of version of the sculpture, and we took it to all the art colleges, and we took it to St. Martin's School of Art, and we did such an amazing publicity for it that we are still doing. Every time that we do a show, we arrange a total publicity. We want everybody there to see the show. And so we created it. We used to go around with what we call tape recorder, shouting, "Come to see our new sculpture, come to see our new sculpture." And we used to give away marshmallows and and cigarettes. And
it was enormously successful. We didn't like the idea of the lectures at St. Martin's, where 17 people would turn up to listen to a very important person. So that's why we had this amazing publicity. So the whole of the assembly hall was filled. And when we did the singing sculpture, all of the students and the lecturers were there. And in the middle of the sculpture, the head of sculpture, the late Frank Martin, stomped out in rage, very noticeably. So all 400 people realized that something important had happened. It was an amazing magic moment.
In that moment, we had all the art students with us. That's it.
So, I mean, there are two phrases which people connect to you and which you've made iconic. One is living sculpture. The other, which seems very related to the idea of living sculpture, is art for all.
Yes, that's been key. Has been key to us from the first day, and becomes more and more relevant as time goes by. We were brought up by lecturers who believed that fine art was something to do with fine art, that the subject of art was art, and that it was a question of formalism. It was a question of color and shape and design and good sculpture. And we always believed that art has to be involved with death,
hope,
life,
fear,
sex,
money,
race,
and religion.
And all of the subjects that lie within all of you this evening and all of the other dear souls around this planet of ours. We wanted the universal thoughts and feelings.
But we realized that to make an art for all, you have to make an art that is human. It's totally human like everybody else. No? We don't want to be different. We don't want to super art it. We want to be the sculptors or whatever it is in front of the audience, in front of everybody else. And we are trying to project feelings, a vision that we have in our head, how to be human. That's what we're always trying to do.
So we would actually define our art as the friendship that is formed between the viewer and the picture, and what happens to that person afterwards, what they say to other people, how they think again or remember it or don't remember it. It's how we always say you can read a book and enjoy it very much, but you can't recite it word for word to a friend, but you can tell that friend what part of you is different because you read it. And that's the essence of culture, the great force of culture.
And even then, at the beginning, when we started to make our art, we realized that he wanted to make it emotional, even like that's why we did what they call the singing sculpture. Then we did the drinking sculpture. Then we did what they call
Red Mornings,
Dusty Corner. Then we did a desperate art. Then we did a religious art. Then we did what they call the sexuality in art and how to behave. In fact, it is behavior in front of the world.
Would I be right in saying, if I was to try to be very simple about this, that the vision of Gilbert and George has always been to put feelings ahead of intellect?
Yes, we are always a little nervous when people say that we're not intellectual, we're to do with feeling, because we don't believe that. We think we're as intellectual, more intellectual than our contemporaries. But foremost is the meaning, carrying the meaning out into the world, because we believe in the force of culture. We don't believe in politics. We don't believe in the church. We think they're all more important than all of those things is culture. We think the great Western Christian triumph of North America, Europe, Australasia, and a few little outposts is not a political success story. It's a cultural one. We live by being cultural beings. We believe that we are all of us tonight, we're all part of what gramophone records our grandparents did or did not dance to. We're all part of what television programs our parents did or did not watch. We believe in the force of culture.
But we do want the public to understand our art. That's very important. We don't want them to run away and saying, I don't know what it means. We want to create a friendship with the viewer, and we did that. We have able to, what you call, and has to provoke thoughts, our art. It has to provoke thoughts. And we are even very interested in moral dimension, how to behave as human beings. I think that's a big part of our art, because we know that we are alone here, and we have to get on with each other. We don't believe in God, so we are alone here. And that's why culture is one vehicle to what we call to find ways through this journey to the end that we call it.
That's why we say our two main mottos are ban religion and decriminalize sex. Because it maybe sounds amusing, but we should think just very briefly about those dear souls now, at this moment, lying on the floor of some horrible room in some dreadful country, awaiting execution for doing nothing more than all of you did last Wednesday. And that's a great shame on humanity, we think. A great shame.
Absolutely. You just used, Gilbert, you just used a very interesting phrase. You said you were that the art of Gilbert and George is very concerned with the moral dimension. Could you explain a little bit what you mean by the moral dimension?
Moral dimension we always feel, because morality changes every single day, you know. It's not standing still like we have been told, you know. In the Quran or in the Bible, everything is standing still. Everything is written in stone. But we want a morality that can change. It can what do we need today to be more friendly to each other? And that's the moral dimension. Can be more elaborate, more different views, accepting more than accepting less.
There must have been something very, very profound about the singing sculpture. And I saw in your archive not so long ago some press coverage from when you made that sculpture in New York. Could you tell us a little bit about it? Because it was a huge success, wasn't it? I mean, in a way that contemporary art just wasn't that successful.
I think the singing sculpture, as in general with the living sculptures, was the basis of all that we do. So the pictures we have in our exhibition in Athens today are not made by picture makers. They're made by sculptors. So when we left college, we weren't practiced and taught how to make a picture. We had no idea. We had to find our own way, our own language. And so we started with black and white because we only knew how to take images with the camera. And it took us 3 years to find red and another 3 years to find yellow. So we weren't like artists or amateur artists or children who have the box of colors or the box of crayons. We had to find our own visual language, and that was very important. That's why our pictures are instantly recognizable, because it's a unique form.
The living sculptures or the singing sculpture at the beginning were extraordinary because we made ourselves the art. And then even when we did the singing sculpture in New York, we had on the table and singing underneath the arches. And everybody in front of us, they were fixed. They were transfixed by it. They were standing still, and they were all crying. It was an amazing, emotional piece of art that it was able to transcend, full of extraordinary feeling. And even after that, we are trying to, we found a new way of what you call like chucking feelings on the wall, we call it, not like pseudo-photo pieces that we created for ourselves. We created a language to leave something behind. I remember Konrad Fischer said when we did the singing sculpture in Düsseldorf, so why don't you do something in the gallery? And we thought, what can we do? I mean, we only are living sculptors. So we had the idea that we could leave some, what you call, some testaments behind, or some talks behind, some images behind, some pieces of writing.
We wanted messages, really.
Messages. And that's when we did
it's very strange,
relaxing.
We only knew 2 or 3 things at that time. We were very simple country people. We knew walking, viewing, and relaxing. And we did a triptych of charcoal on paper sculptures, just called walking, viewing, relaxing, which we could understand and you can all understand.
But it had to be made like we didn't do it. Yeah. It had to be made like it existed already somewhere.
Sure, I think it was important also that as baby artists emerging in London, we didn't feel that we wanted to do what all of our contemporaries were doing, which was trying to be successful artists, because we felt that we were in ourselves. We felt very proud and grand, even though we had no money and no studio and no gallery or anything, but we still felt very self-assured. And our habit was to explore London. So all of the other baby artists were practicing being good artists. And we were walking around London. And being country people, we were absolutely fascinated, as we are now, whenever we're in a city, to think of all those shops and all those flats and all those houses and all of those police stations and public swimming baths and universities and shops. And we are fascinated by the creation of the Western society. And so it was that was on our minds, not becoming successful artists.
So we put up these 3-piece or 4-piece in the gallery of Konrad Fischer. And he said, so how much should we charge? And I remember we said, 1,000 guineas.
Which was an enormous sum of money. We never imagined someone would buy it, ever. And
next day he came back and said, I sold it.
Next day.
That was a very big disaster for us. After that, we had to do a lot of drinking sculptures.
Is it true? I mean, I've heard the story that you actually, even though these early drawings were hugely successful, and the General Jungle drawing has just been shown in London, and it got wildly successful. Is it true, though, that you stopped making drawings because people liked them?
We gave it up. The idea of doing the charcoal on paper sculptures was to express ourselves and tell of our thoughts and feelings in relation to the viewers' lives. And generally speaking, some people got that and some people felt that, but overall was the people's admiration of the subject, of the paper, of the charcoal, of the crinkly edges, how they were hanging on the walls. They were fascinated by the aesthetics, and we hated that. And so we found a much more direct way to reach people.
Because overall it looked like old-fashioned art, and we didn't like that. And we did not like the artistic hand. We wanted to remove the artistic hand from making art for us. That's why we were concentrated completely on the negative, pressing that button and freezing time. And for us, that was a much more modern way of making art.
But the charcoal and paper sculptures were very important in that they paved the way for the pictures we make now. Yeah. We couldn't make the pictures we make now if we hadn't have done. They share the negative image. All of the charcoal on paper are all based on the negative image. Yeah. They have panels, the same as we have now. Yeah. The thoughts and feelings is the same direction. But they were very important for us at that time.
And not only that, it was very important when we started to find ourselves the new language, how to speak, through the negative image. That so we were able to take subjects, like we had a dictionary of subjects, Like maybe we were able to take like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 images, of ideas that interest us. In fact, it's this like the Renaissance artists, they used to go out in sketching, doing drawings, or like the waterfall, the young boy, or the prostitute, but we're using the same kind of idea through taking the camera and fixing these images. And after that, going back in the studio and creating what we call a composition of our feelings, what we wanted to express. And it's a very good way of making art.
But it's very great because we still maintain the mystery. It still is the way we create the pictures is still something that we don't understand exactly. And that's very important. That's what leads to the moral dimension. When we go to our studio in the morning, we never go with ideas or plans. We go completely empty, dead-headed, zonked. And how we are inside that month or that year, how we feel is how those pictures have to be. We have to lift them out from inside of ourselves. And only by taking images again and again can we find the moral dimension. I remember, just to explain it very, very simply, for years we used to take images of chewing gums on the street. In the mornings we would go, and we found you could only take them after rain and before they dried out entirely. So they had to have the dirt in the cracks, and we thought, why is it every year we take these silly images of chewing gums? We never put them in the pictures because we didn't know what they meant. And then one day, we realized that, of course, they have a moral dimension. Each one of those chewing gums was put there by an individual person who is maybe alive and maybe dead, maybe in prison, maybe in love, maybe happy, maybe unhappy. So those little things on the street could tell an extraordinary story. And then we were able to put them in the picture. Yes. Even
we always say we are working in a black bag, in a black room or black bag. And even we don't want to make art with the eyes open. We want to make art with the eyes closed, because only what is inside you, that's important. What is outside, that's normal. Only what you feel as a person inside you, that is the expression of art for us.
I mean, two questions, really. You've referred at times to seeing the course of your art as being rather like your Pilgrim's Progress, referring to the book by John Bunyan about a person's spiritual journey. Do you see your art as visionary art?
Yes. We like very much to be visionary artists. That's probably why our biggest hero has to be William Blake, because he's a visionary artist. that it walks the journey. We always feel we are the two artists walking the journey towards the end, you know, and confronted, like John Bunyan's, what they call, confronted by evil pilgrim, confronted by good, bad, and prostitutes, and all the complexity of life that you have to go through this jungle. It's extraordinary.
John Bunyan is a very curious example because it's one of the most famous, most unread books. It's extraordinary. Everyone knows it and nobody's read it. We did actually read it a year ago, and it is very simple and very interesting and very beautiful. It's just a man who would like to be saved, he would like to go to heaven, and doesn't know how to, but he can see that a lot of people in the village near where he lives are sure of going to heaven. And he doesn't understand how they've achieved that. And he sees the lady who sells the bread in the bread shop has a nice smile and a contented way of life. And he's very, very jealous because he hasn't achieved that. So it's even if you put the religion to one side, it still is a fascinating idea.
Because I've always been interested. You, George, were living in the East End of London when you met Gilbert, yes?
Yes.
And you found virtually all of the subject matter for your art within a couple of blocks of where you live in Spitalfields in East London. Is that true?
Yes, I think we never felt we had to travel to find inspiration, or we always felt that what we always used to say, if you step outside the door in the morning, whatever is there is what's in the world in general. If you find a pool of vomit on the street and a pigeon having breakfast with it, and you wonder whether it was an Indian meal or a Chinese takeaway, why did the person vomit? Was he so unhappy that he drank too much or ate too much? There's an amazing human story in every pool of vomit.
And not only that, because East End of London is the melting pot of all the different cultures. Yeah. It's extraordinary. So you have the Cockney there, you have the Bangladeshi there, you have the bankers there, you have what they call all the hipsters now, young people, all mixed together, and that's where it's happening. That's where we can understand life. We don't have to be inspired by walking up a mountain. We're just in front of us. Even, like you said, with closed eyes, you can feel the world, what is going on. And I believe we understand it very well, in fact. And never want to do more than 100 meters. Okay, when we did the drawings, we used to go to Regent's Park to take the images, or we Kew Garden to take them, to make a pose ourselves in the middle of the jungle, because we always call it a jungle of life.
That's because being country people, when we first started to make art, we didn't know how to use the city that was around us as we do now. So we just used the idea of the countryside, of parks and foliage and trees and bushes. And it was 3 or 4 years later when we did probably the red morning pictures, where we contrasted the city. Every picture has half nature and half the city. And then we went on to discover, with the Dirty Words pictures and others, that we became a real city, urban, Western artist, which we weren't before.
And we saw the drunks in our street. We saw the vagabonds, we saw the prostitutes, we saw the skinheads, we saw the rich people. No? They're all there. We saw the Bangladeshis, the young ones and the old ones, and the conflict of religions in that street is extraordinary. On one end, you have the Anglican, and the other hand, you have what they call the Muslims. No? And this amazing confrontation of cultures. And we are in the middle there.
Yes. And we're within a short walking distance of the house of John Wesley, who was the leader and inventor of the second biggest group of Christians in the world. We're in short walking distance from the tomb of William Blake, of Daniel Defoe, and of the founder of the Quakers, George Fox, all within our neighborhood. It's extraordinary.
So one of the things that I felt was that when you first came to that area in the East End of London, I mean, now where you live is, I mean, it's incredibly fashionable, it's very, very wealthy. It's not totally, but I mean, it's an expensive district. When, if you don't mind reminiscing, what was it like when you first moved there in the late 60s?
We thought it was a magical wonderland of history and modernity together, that everything was there. We're still fascinated by that.
When George took me to the east end of London from St. Martin's School of Art, and I saw this, what he calls this 18th century, 18th century London there, it felt like you're walking into a Dickens book, you know, completely like that, because you have this dark, especially in the evening, when the sky is dark, you know, and you have these yellow lights, and it is just totally magic. And it was interesting because George used to teach hooligans in Hoxton Street in 67, 68, and all that stuff.
At the Quaker Centre.
And the Quaker Centre. And even that was, in some way, it was down to earth.
Yes. Yeah. It's extraordinary to remember that most of the people who lived in that district were tramps. The biggest group of people resident were tramps. There were 3 huge hostels for men who'd lost their way in life, 1 big hostel for ladies who'd lost their way in life. It was extraordinary.
And it was quite extraordinary because at that time, Brick Lane, who is still famous, and they used to have 2 Indian restaurants, and after that it became very famous for, I don't know, 20, 30 Indian restaurants. But that time, in 68, 69, 70, we used to go to one and the tramps used to come in and grab a hand of food from your plate and walk out.
And go out eating it. And the other one we used to go to, we were the only white people who ever went there, except for the police, who went there for a free takeaway. And being honest, idiotic country folk, we agonized over which telephone number do you report corrupt police to.
And it was quite interesting because he went to prison
Twice.
For stealing money and all that stuff. And in prison, he realized that we were famous artists because he was able to read newspaper, and he saw the only people he recognized us were us. You know?
And so he came to us one day and said that he would like to see our catalogue. He thought it was like something he could choose from, yeah. And we tried to put him off. We said, well, it's rather modern. It's rather modern. You probably wouldn't like it. And he said, no, I'm very interested. And I said, well, actually, it's rather expensive. He said, I like very much modern expensive.
I mentioned a little earlier this amazing exhibition that you held at Jean Bernier and Marina's gallery in the early 2000s called The 9 Dark Pictures. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that particular group of pictures, but also how you come to envisage making a group of pictures. Like from the very beginning you had the dirty words pictures, the naked ship pictures, the cosmological pictures, now the beard pictures.
But the mystery, you want to know this?
The mystery.
It is a mystery even to us, I must say. Even when we go down in the morning to the studio and see the design for a picture we did the previous day, we would never be able to reconstruct exactly how or why that picture is like that. The act of creating something is very mysterious and very strange.
Sorry. The way you have a group and you have a theme, like with the 9 dark pictures, something must have happened in your head.
I think
not exactly.
We feel the world.
Yes.
We are not part of the art world. We feel the naked world, and that's where our ideas come from. Being alone and feeling the world. We feel it, what's going on all the time, and we were able to take images what interests us. Yeah. We always take images what interests. What are the new ideas? What is feeling? Are the skies? Are it trams? Or are what you call doors? Or how do you express this feeling, like closed doors and the world is falling in on you? And then we take images and then we make it, what you call subconscious.
I think
never very conscious.
I think without thinking and without being conscious, I think we felt an atmosphere of threat and danger without being very conscious of it.
Yeah. And when you made the 9 dark pictures?
Yes.
In the build-up to making those pictures.
It's very simple. Like we say, we only have to feel, because very near us is what they call it's a mosque, you know? And we used to see all these stickers, you know, these anti-Westerns, anti-West, anti-us, anti-infidels, whatever.
Tiny stickers.
Tiny sticker.
And on the lampposts.
On the lamppost. And that's where it came from. We saw it.
I think, as somebody who went to that exhibition here in Athens, what immediately I found very, very emotional about it was that every picture in its different way seemed to be about farewell, about people kind of closing down, things being shut, things coming to an end.
That did happen to the world. Yeah.
And it did. And it's interesting that since then, you've done, for instance, the scapegoating pictures, the London pictures,
The Jack Freak ones.
the Jack Freak pictures,
The religious ones.
the religious. And do you think it's far-fetched or just too romantic of me to think that there is an aspect of your art which is, as they would say, psychic? I mean, I know you're very interested in spiritualism and in the history of the occult, like you're interested in...
We're not cynical.
No, but do you ever feel that in some ways your art does seem to pick up on massive changes in the zeitgeist, in geopolitical...
I think we have very good eyes for seeing that stuff,
I
for
think
feeling it.
I would say we're very conscious that we never wanted to reflect life or show life. We really would like to think that we're trying to form our tomorrows, that the world will be a little bit different because of the pictures we're creating.
I mean, we do believe in culture. Yes. I really is that is turning the whole world. It's extraordinary, super, what you call, to being able to see the world and the behavior of people in different ways, you know, like that. We liberated ourselves from religion. I think that was the biggest. That's more than anything else. That's more important than anything else. We are free people. You know? Yes. We are free human beings, and free soul, and you roughly can do what you want in the world. And that's.
And however far-fetched it sometimes seems, it is culture and poetry and books and pictures and music that is leading the way. It is leading the way.
Yeah.
But the world is so extraordinary these days through what you call, through the computers, through the what you call the telephone, and so it's amazing. Yeah. It became so small. Everybody is able to feel the world totally, day and night. Yeah. We think there's an amazing advantage. Yes.
It's interesting in recent years that the big groups of pictures you've made, they seem to have fallen almost into two types. There are the London pictures, for instance, and the scapegoating pictures, which feel quite stark, quite journalistic almost. They have a sense of current affairs, of the energy that's happening on the streets in almost any modern city. And visually, they are quite straightforward. They're black, white, red, normally.
Skin color, yeah.
And then you have pictures like the Jack Freak pictures and now the Beard pictures, which visually are incredibly extravagant. They're kind of almost reminiscent of like vaudeville or music hall, or they have this kind of crazy cabaret.
Celebratory as well, we think. Yeah?
Celebratory.
In that we're very optimistic, and we do believe that everything is fantastic and the world has never been a better place. We're not critical, we're not anti-government.
Even when you're making the London pictures on subjects like rape and suicide.
Even that, I think. I mean, there are many, many countries in the world where you can't have a poster outside the newsagent saying, woman raped on tube. So even that those posters exist is a triumph of
it's kind of immediate.
Freedom.
It's immediate. I mean, what you call the beard picture is quite interesting because we started out seeing all over Europe and America barbed wire. Yeah. And it was an amazing subject for us, and fences. And we were talking about walls, you know, building up walls to keep ourselves in and don't let the other ones in. You know? And And then we started to see all bearded people looking through these fences, looking through the barbed wire. Then we started to see the beard, this what you call a religious beard, what you call hipster beard, and all these different kind of religion with the beard. They're so important, no? Yeah. And it was an extraordinary idea, what you call how important beards are for religious beards.
Yeah. The more we made the pictures, the more we realized their relevance and the simplicity of that relevance. Yeah? Yes. I mean, it's so simple. It's amusing. When we were teenagers, you wouldn't get a job in a smart cocktail bar if you had a beard, and now you wouldn't get a job in a smart cocktail bar if you didn't have a beard. And when we were young people, barbed wire had only to do with one thing: farming. Now it has to do a lot more than that.
So after a while, we started to see the beard in this picture that could become like open gates, open fire, or a key to go through. And we made ourselves like pixies, walking around into the woods. And it was quite interesting, because when we showed all these new pictures to friends of ours, I never saw them so happy.
They enjoyed
them, and there was something different.
They have an element.
Enjoyment, I was so happy. And that's quite interesting art, to make an art that you can, what you call, be happy with it.
I mean, I've always wondered, right, going back to the very beginning, how important humor is to you in your art. Because when you make a picture, there's one of the beard pictures, for instance, which is called Fuck Off Hipsters. And it's quite difficult to look at that picture without sort of finding it in some ways amusing. The title, it has a kind of punchline feel to it.
On the other hand, you have to ask yourself, who writes Fuck Off Hipsters on the walls of London? They're deeply nationalistic, dangerous people doing that, probably. Yeah. Probably.
So,
I mean, we want to include it.
Yeah.
Well, we wouldn't call it humor ourselves.
Yeah. But we want to include everything. I really, it's very important.
Yeah. So when you depict yourself, say, in the Jack Freak pictures, and you're wearing kind of amazing Union Jack suits and you're dancing, is that kind of a variation on the singing sculpture in some ways? Is it, or...
No, I think
we're
trying to
musical.
I think we're trying to reach something that is inside everybody.
Yeah. But it is like the Cockneys in some way, going out and be part of.
Are children dancing around in the garden, or are there people dancing very seriously at a funeral of some friend? I mean, dancing is such a big part of every society.
Dancing and what you call, like even the title is quite interesting, because it's called the Jack Freak. Yeah. Because they're trying to say that, it's all nationalistic. It's not. It's just completely the freakishness of dress with Union Jacks, no? Yeah. It's like a maniac in some way, no? Yeah. And that's quite interesting for us.
We're not against people finding amusement in the pictures or anything else. We're always fascinated by the ability of pictures to bring out what's inside of the viewer. I always remember we went to the opening of our show in The Hague, is it in Holland or
Holland? Yeah.
In Holland, yeah. And it was the opening of the cosmological pictures, and a lady came up to us and said, "Congratulations, gentlemen! This is such an explosion of joy and happiness. The colour and the nature and the trees. It's so beautiful. It's like I feel in my new marriage and my happiness in life. There it is in your art." And we said, "Thank you very much." And she drifted away, and a gentleman came up and said, "Gentlemen, I just would like to tell you that I feel so comfortable in an exhibition where the artists are dealing with the darker and more difficult aspects of life, because I'm going through a very, very difficult time in my life, but I feel reassured and consoled by these very dark pictures." The same pictures. Extraordinary.
That's it. Yeah. That happens all the time. It depends on who you are in front of the pictures, no? That's what is interesting. Who are you in front of the picture? What are you searching for?
So to some extent, the viewer is bringing...
It's half.
It's half of the picture.
Yes, half of the picture is the viewer.
They're bringing. Because you've had a lot of... I mean, I don't know any other artist in the world. I mean, maybe Andy Warhol once upon a time, a long time ago, but I don't know any other artist who gets so much press attention as you do. I mean, with your recent exhibition in London, you know, it was on the national news and things.
It's exciting.
It's never enough for us.
Yeah. True, but there is always the dark side of that, which is that you've also been open to a lot of criticism over the years.
We accept that.
We accept that.
We believe in a free world. That's the great invention, again, of the great Western Christian triumph, is that the freedom that everyone has.
I mean, it's quite interesting because even getting older, you don't care so much anymore. When we were young, we cared a lot. It felt
it's interesting.
painful, but now we don't.
We always accept the idea of the press and interviews because when we were baby artists, we discovered that the reason why a person in a city doesn't go, the most common reason a person in a city doesn't see an exhibition is that they didn't know it was on.
Yeah.
And so you can never reach every person in Athens
the
to inform them anyway.
Publicity for us is very important.
Yes.
I remember even like when we did the show, The Naked Chet Pictures in London, we paid for it. We paid for poster, like £50,000. Without publicity, without people knowing, it's useless. And we always did that. Even when the big stage show, we put so much money in. And we are very keen on designing the poster, designing the poster that work. We are very keen to make catalogs that people can pick up and be involved in it. We don't like designers' catalog. We have a vision when we make our own catalog. It has to do with the viewer, how when he opens up that book, does he chuck it away or does he go through? And that's it. And even like this one, if you chuck them in the street, they will go through. Ordinary people will be interested in it, and that's what we want.
Do you feel that when you were students, to go right back to the beginning, to maybe end at the beginning again, that when you were met as students, that an awful lot of contemporary art seemed elitist and exclusive?
All of those forms and thoughts were a great driving force to us.
Yeah.
Because we realized.
And are they still?
We're still very conscious that a lot of art and a lot of culture tends to exclude 92% of the world's population. That they do an art which can only be understood in certain galleries in London, Paris, New York, and nowhere else. And so, however difficult and obscure and hard it is to do, we would like to create pictures that you could, in theory, show anybody anywhere in the world, and they would still be able to read them in some way. Yeah? Whether on a postcard or a catalogue or in a newspaper article, that they would still read.
And we like the idea to create museum shows. That's very important for us because we are able to show a world. You know? We are able to create a world, the world of Gilbert and George. People go in. We are not so keen on one picture. It's limited. But when you show like 100, 200 pictures, you create the G&G world. You walk into that. And that's very exciting for us.
Is it true that when you used to do the singing sculpture, and when you also just when you have been out in public, that people feel driven to come and ask you questions and to tell you their problems and things?
I think that element has always been there. People are touched by art in that way. When we did the first living sculpture in Hyde Park, for instance, it was on the occasion of the huge Rolling Stones concert. And we didn't go for the concert. We didn't even see it or go near it. We went because there was this huge number of people in the park that we could present a living sculpture to. And people did come up and ask very
But
quite interesting, strange
now
questions.
in London, they all come up to us. It's extraordinary stuff.
I've seen it happen, yeah.
All the time. Everybody knows us. They all come up and say how much about the God, because in some way our art speaks to them, and that it works. That's why they come up to. And not only that, because we have the image, that is G readers use. Even that is very helpful. You have a clear idea what we are. And that goes, simplicity is very important for us to get the message.
Yeah.
On the other side.
With complicated things, you have to be very, very simple.
Yeah.
That's why we're very proud that we're able to reach a wider range of the general public than most art. We're very excited by that. People, even we are known and admired by people who don't even go to exhibitions. I don't know how it filters through, but it seems to do that.
Didn't you have an occasion where you were having, this is going to sound like we're name dropping, and I don't mean to, but weren't you once having dinner with Madonna, and somebody came up and wanted
your... that was very good, yeah. No, we were approached through our gallery by a very famous lady pop star. This is not the name that Michael said. A famous pop star. And she wanted to meet us to discuss art, I suppose from her point of view of her art. And we said, well, we'll take her for dinner, yeah. So we arranged a favourite restaurant of ours, and we arrived at the restaurant, but we didn't know that she in advance had contacted that restaurant and had given the restaurant owner a list of instructions that only one waiter was allowed to serve the table, that no members of staff were to ask for autographs, no photographs would be allowed. A huge list of very imposing, rather silly instructions. Anyway, we went to the restaurant. She was with a minder who pretended to be her partner, and we sat down. In the middle of dinner, a very nice lady from a neighbouring table got up and advanced towards our table with a pen and a scrap of paper. And the guard started to get up, and the pop star started to get tense. And the lady arrived at our table and said, "I'm sorry to trouble you, gentlemen, but I'm such a great admirer of your art. Could I have your autograph?" She was furious.
I wanted to say thank you all very, very much indeed for coming to hear Gilbert and George talking. I feel, just personally, that we are living in a very, very strange world, and we need the art of Gilbert and George more and more. But there's one last thing before you go, which is that because this is a very special occasion, and because Gilbert and George are so pleased to be here in this amazing foundation, they have agreed for you to do a short reprise of possibly one of their best-loved works. And so can we thank Gilbert and George? And they're now going to do the singing sculpture.
So it is very simple, because we were wandering through London, not trying to be artists, that we came across a utopian housing estate called Summertown. And it was built in the 1920s, and it's painted white. It looks like you're in Crete, not behind Euston Station. And it was so idealistic that the designer had beautiful birds made of ceramics on the top of the poles that would hold the washing lines. And we were in love with the idea of all these people in these glorious flats, and wondered how it would be to live there. And then on the ground floor, there was a group of retail shops which served the people in those flats. And one of the shops had a wonderful purpose. It was a shop that sold the things that are left behind in a flat when people leave, the things, the detritus of life, the odd bits. And we went into that shop, and for some reason, a small black gramophone record found us. And we took it back to the studio, and we realized that it was saying what we all know about. It was a song about two people who are very disadvantaged and in a very poor situation, but they are very full of hope and jolly, and they're trying to make the best of very difficult circumstances. So it starts off by saying, "The Ritz we never sigh for, the Carlton they can keep. There's only one place that I know, and that is where I sleep. Underneath the arches, I dream my dreams away. Underneath the arches, on cobblestones we lay. Every night you'll find me, tired out and worn, happy when the daylight comes creeping, heralding the dawn. Sleeping when it's raining, and sleeping when it's fine. La-dee-dee-dee-da-da-da-da-da-da. Pavement is my pillow, no matter where we stray. Underneath the arches, I dream my dreams away. Thank you.
Thank you.